It was always a goal during my first few months of ministry here that I would meet with groups that we would call gatherings and have a chat. We've done 2 of those gatherings so far. The third one is today after worship. And already, even after only 2, certain themes have emerged. One of them is that there are many different things that draw people to Union Congregational. Some like the social justice aspect of our ministry. Some like the children's education component. Some have been drawn in and have stayed because of adult education opportunities. Some have found spiritual development and spiritual growth here. Others have just had fun. So what has come out of these meetings so far, and granted we have a way to go yet, but what has come out for me so far is that at Union we are blessed with a certain abundance, time, talent, and treasure. And that the primary question for us going forward is not, can we do it? The question is, do we want to do it? I mean, do we really want to do that? Can we get our heads around the notion that we can do anything? Which is not the same thing as saying we can do everything. Lord knows we can't do everything. This is tremendously exciting. A good friend of mine, another Dave. His name is Dave Wanless. Dave lives in Cape Town, South Africa. He is the former communications director for Desmond Tutu. He came to Colorado a number of years ago and preached at the congregation where I previously served. And then I met him in South Africa and preached for him at his church in Cape Town. Now, I admit that this is a very uneven relationship in that I think he can offer me quite a bit more than I can offer him as we swap stories. I like to listen and listen and listen and listen. One of his favorite stories is about some of the dark realities of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as it happened in South Africa. Many of you are at least somewhat familiar with that process, that there was a period of reckoning and people were invited to tell their own truth and to be reconciled to one another through truth telling. That oppressors would seek out forgiveness from the oppressed. Come forward was the message. Tell the truth. You who served in the police and oppressed others during apartheid, come forward and tell the truth and you will be forgiven. Those of you who were in the military, the blockaded townships, come forward and tell the truth and you will be set free. You will not be prosecuted. But if you hold on to your truth, if you do not seek out forgiveness, then you will be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And the majority of the time, what happened? According to Dave, nothing. Just not the same thing as saying that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission failed completely, but that it failed in some things it was trying to achieve. What happened was members of the police and the army thought, you know what? I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see who else comes forward. I don't want to be the first to go forward. I'm going to wait and see. And the leaders of the commission were saying, you know, you're being invited into grace. You can be fully exonerated. You can be free. All you have to do is come forward right now and say, this is who I am and what I've done, and I wish to be free of this. And the response was, I'm going to wait and see, because I don't quite believe you. I don't quite believe in this new day, in this new country. I don't believe in this new economy. I don't believe in a rainbow people. I definitely don't believe in the idea of white and black marching forward together in a new day of prosperity, so I shall wait and see. In John 6, it is spring. If there was a weather forecast on weather.com, it would say sunny with a 20% chance of showers. It's likely past the time of year when it's definitely going to rain. It's likely hot and dry as the story begins. And this story is really strange for a lot of reasons. We've heard it enough or read it enough where its mystifying properties may well have lost their power for some of us. But really, if you hear this story and you really think about it, you'll begin to see that it gets harder and harder to find yourself in that story. I couldn't have been there that day. I couldn't have found myself in this position. Why would you think that? Well, because many of you would have been far better prepared than those people. Some of you would definitely have lugged a cooler or had a Camelback and some Cliff Bars just in case. A few of you even would have had those nice plastic wine glasses with a basket and a red and white plaid tablecloth. Yes. Bug spray, sunscreen, it goes on and on and on. How could these people have been so unprepared? Could thousands, as the story tells it, thousands of people really left home without anything? It's not like the climate was going to be a surprise. It's not like the terrain was a shock to most of these folks. Really? Could all of them have been that unprepared? And so perhaps the more cynical part of you says, no, not all of them. No way. Some of them surely had a bit of bread in their pockets. Surely someone had something under his tunic. And now you already know where this interpretation is heading. That if people had food, in fact, under their tunics or in their pockets, Jesus' main job was to convince them to get it out, to share it with each other. That the miracle from Jesus is not that he multiplied the bread and the fish. It's that he was able to convince the people to share what they already had, to get that bread out of their pockets or out from under their tunics. And that is the end. That is the story. And that's a fine story. I mean, I like that interpretation. Ask the question, what's in my pocket? And the answer is, whatever you find, you should share it. Again, a fine story. It may be a heretical interpretation of the story, but it's a fine interpretation of the story. But I'm not convinced, as the Gospel of John tells this story to us, that the problem for the people that day was only that they hoarded. Perhaps part of the issue is that they wanted Jesus to be a magician. Do your hocus pocus thing, Jesus, and if you get it right, we'll turn you into an idol. We'll make you a king, the text says. Which sounds a lot like the narrative in the book of Exodus, doesn't it? The people escape Pharaoh, and then later they run into trouble by making idols and seeking to worship them. Jesus, do your thing, and if we like it enough, we'll make you a king. We will turn you into an idol, is what they seem to be saying. And there are lots of pieces in the Exodus story that are woven into John 6. John 6 has bread, of course, and salvation that comes from the chaos of water, which are essential themes of the Exodus. Manna coming from heaven, the splitting of the sea. Jesus commands that all the pieces of bread be gathered up so that nothing is wasted, which is also what Moses commanded the people in Exodus 16. Jesus is said to go up the mountain, not a mountain, but the mountain in verse 3 and in verse 15, which is intended to recall Israel's big story of Moses communing with God. The people in John 6, they grumble and they mumble and they complain, just as Israel did in the wilderness. And because the story is woven with the narrative of Moses, and because the people in John sound a lot like the Israelites in the Exodus story, we can dig around a little bit more. At issue, I believe, was not that people were unwilling to share and then decided to share. Perhaps what is at issue has much more to do with God. That the story is not so much about the people as it is about God, and that the people could not come to believe in a God who deals in a different type of economy from a human economy. That in God's economy, abundance is the starting point. That in God's economy, as the Bible portrays God, God likes nothingness, because you can create out of nothingness. You can offer an abundance out of nothingness. Maybe the problem in John 6 was not that there was a scarcity of food, but that the scarcity was the age-old one where behavior was dictated by belief in a God of scarcity, a God of limited resources. Jesus asks the disciples about food, knowing full well what he's going to have to do. He knows about human economics and the way we think, and Philip proves to be adept at proving this point. He is very good at arithmetic. All of a sudden, when food is presented, Philip says 6 months' wages would not buy enough bread for each of them to get a little, and Andrew adds, "But what are these fish and loaves among so many?" They are so good at math and doing it very quickly. And yet Jesus is undaunted by these great economic minds that surround him, and shows the crowds not so much that they are hoarders, as much as Jesus shows them what faith in a God who provides abundantly looks like. In God's economy, this offering from this child is enough. It is enough. Even as people are invited into grace all around the world, in many different contexts and situations, when people are invited into a different kind of economy, when they are invited to be a part of the rainbow people, have a chance at new hope, a chance to celebrate the richness of good news, they all too often will say, "I'm going to wait and see. I'm going to wait and see what happens. I'm going to wait and see who goes first." My son Benjamin enjoyed first grade for the most part. He did have an issue. And every child has issues that they have to sort out in some capacity, in the classroom, in the schoolyard. He had an issue with another child. It happens all the time. So one day, Ben was out in the schoolyard, and this other child asked Ben how come Ben wasn't playing with him, and Ben said, apparently, because I don't want to. And this other child didn't like that answer, and so put his hands on Ben's chest and shoved him. Ben was stood right next to a snowbank, and he kind of took half a step back and sat down right on a snowbank. The other child walked away. Ben's friend, a boy named John, came over to Ben and said, "Ben, are you okay?" And Ben said, "Yeah. But could you sit down next to me for a little while?" And so John sat down next to Ben in the snow and let his pants get all cold and wet too. And they sat there together and talked about how things were going to be different next time. And that's a nice story. If I may be so bold, that's even possibly a great story. But it's not the whole story, because that was first grade. And I knew John in kindergarten. John had come to this country when he was just young. He's originally from Peru. And in kindergarten had a hard time fitting in. A great deal of difficulty fitting in. He was a child who often distracted the kindergarten teacher, and the kindergarten teacher spent a lot of time with John, trying to get him focused and staying on track. I met John because John went to the bathroom when he was in kindergarten once, and he came up to me with his belt untied, and he said, "Can you do my belt up for me?" And I said, "John, I really don't want to put my hands where your belt buckle is, so I think you need to ask your teacher, please." John walked up. "Oh, okay, no problem. That's fine." The point is that John had enough difficulty focusing in kindergarten that the ability to go and sit with Ben in first grade was, to me, nothing short of a miracle. People change. People grow. Communities change. Communities grow. And the seed of that change and that growth, if it is healthy and positive, is a belief in a God that supplies abundantly. Is belief in a God of hope. It is a belief that when God interacts with us, it is enough. John 6, to me, is an invitation to us all. Come. Come and be free. Come and grow as you need to grow. Come and be fed as you need to be fed. For you are enough. You have always been enough. May God's peace be with you all.